Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to hit the subscribe button and support the channel. The first story of the day is by Dishwater Dreams. Fired for hair, restaurant had to close down. When I was in high school, I got a part-time job as a hostess at an Italian restaurant with a friend of mine. The restaurant was only open 5 days a week for dinner. The restaurant was fairly new, but was already filling every table every night because the food was amazing. In addition to my friend and I being the only two hostesses, the busboys were friends, half of the waiters were friends, and the dishwasher was a friend. The owner's son was the floor manager, and with the success of the restaurant, started to implement new changes. Everyone must look presentable and in uniform at all times. No dirty uniforms, even for the busboy. He was rather rude to all employees and would hover and take over our jobs right in front of customers, apologizing for our inability to do our jobs correctly. However, everyone there was fantastic at their jobs. The dishwasher even found creative ways to stay clean and tidy. The straw broke one night when my friend and I were both working the hostess stand on a packed Saturday night. The manager walked up to us and declared our hair was not compliant with dress code. Both of us had our hair pulled back in the requisite buns. However, we both had a few stray wisps. You know, those tiny little new hairs around your face. Never mind that it was August and it was hot and we were all working as a team like crazy to make sure the night ran smoothly, sharing duties such as bussing tables and running food and drinks, underage. He loudly fired both of us on the spot in front of the entire restaurant and front staff. He then said we were required to continue to work for 2 weeks and train our replacements. I asked, "Are we fired?" He said yes. And I said firing means we don't work for you anymore. We walked out, punched our cards, and went to change out of our uniforms. When we got out of the dressing room, there was a line of people waiting to change, including the busboys, half the waitstaff, and the dishwasher. All were so mad about what had happened that they quit on the spot. No one liked the job anyway. We all went to IHOP to eat and were soon joined by the rest of the waitstaff and the line cooks. So all that was left of the entire restaurant staff was the bartender, the owner/cook, and the manager. I later heard that the owner just decided to shut down the restaurant because the only reason he started it was to provide his son a legacy from the family businesses in Italy, and he decided his son couldn't handle it. That's one of the best examples of people sticking together that I've ever heard of. If you were working in a place with your best friend and you saw your best friend get unjustly fired, would you be willing to just walk out on the job as some form of protest? Let me know in the comments down below. This next story is by Viva Chuck. Think about it if you want to be employed here. Will do, boss. So this is from over a decade ago, but it's the only time I've ever quit a job and thought y'all might enjoy it. I worked for Target on their overnight team, 10 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. And eventually a specialist position came up, for which I applied and was granted. This was the position of receiver, scheduled to work 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., which basically was the person who would take in vendor orders, i.e., not things that were sent straight from corporate, but instead the Coca-Cola guy or the Lay's potato chip guy, etc., and specialty orders that came in at times other than the main truck. This was a job where, instead of one major task, you dealt with about 20 minor ones throughout the day. And your day varied based on the whims of the people who are bringing things into you. We had a delivery cutoff of 12 p.m., but management would always say just take things no matter when they came. I generally was really good about managing my time and making sure if I needed to stay late for something important, I did. And if it was something minor, say the Harlequin romance books that could wait overnight to process, I'd get it first thing in the morning. I had a good rapport with my boss, and I got great reviews. Then, my boss got a promotion, and my new boss was a piece of poop. The new boss, we can call him John because that was his name, was a tyrant of the pettiest type. He'd wonder why things were left overnight when I wasn't busy earlier in the day when he saw me, because I'd completed all my tasks and I can't make UPS come faster than they do. When Target's corporate told my department it was busy enough for a 20-hour-a-week worker, he refused to let me get anyone for longer than my 30-minute lunch breaks. The straw that broke my back was P Fresh. For those of you who didn't work at Target in the early 2000s, P Fresh was what they called their new initiative to have groceries in the stores. It was a big deal for them, and my store was one of the pilot stores in our area. I would be the first person to have to deal with it, and then I would have to teach receivers in the area how it works by having them shadow me for a day at my store, and me at theirs when they got their fresh food. The fresh food came in a separate truck that arrived at 4 a.m. I expected, like I was informed, I would simply have to process it first thing in the morning when I got to work. Instead, John decided that my schedule was going to be changed to 4 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Getting up at 3 a.m. to be at work at 4 a.m. was not fun, but I dealt with it because I was a team player. However, John still insisted I needed all of my work done by the time I left at 12:30 p.m., an impossibility when the cutoff for deliveries was 12 p.m. I still prioritized things as good as I could, and nothing urgent was left undone for more than 24 hours. When Target was pretty good at making sure we had plenty of time to receive things before they had to hit the floor for street dates and such. The straw that broke my back was when the specialist position was terminated. Basically, Target wanted those special positions in the normal chain of command, which is fine. However, when they did this, they also gave lots of power to John. You see, it was in my old position that I had weekends off, because people don't deliver on the weekends, and was not required to work holidays, along with being a guaranteed 40-hour-a-week Monday to Friday position. When this change came through, HR informed us that we had a week to decide whether we wanted the position or if we wanted to go to another position in the company, or if we wanted severance. HR informed me that nothing would really be changing with my job because it was still important, whereas other jobs like the jewelry counter weren't considered as important and were being rolled in with other things. I was going to stay with the position until John brought me into the office later that day. He told me he was tired of my poor attitude involving getting things done, so he was changing my schedule to a split shift. Basically, he wanted me to come in from 4 to 5 a.m., then go home for an hour, then come back at 6 a.m. and work until 1:30 p.m. He also told me that any overtime would no longer be allowed and that I'd have to start working one weekend a month and holidays. He also wrote me up for something that I did not do, but the person who covered my lunches did, under the guise of me not training them properly. His words were, "You need to think long and hard about how you're working and think about if you want to be employed here in a month." I told him he was absolutely right. I told him I would be right back. I had to run to the restroom. Instead, I went to HR and told them I'm taking the severance, and as it was 12:25 p.m., I'm guessing this is my last day. I then got to go back to John and tell him what I just said. He told me that I had to come back next week to train my replacement. I walked out of that building happier than I had been in the last 3 years working there. I got texts over the next few months of the fallout. The receiving department was a nightmare for months. And since I was the only one who knew how to handle their refrigerated trucks, they lost an entire truck worth of merchandise that week. That was not a good look for them. Additionally, corporate had to send out people from out of the area to cover all the training I was supposed to provide, which cost them a lot of money and made corporate even more upset at John. Last I heard, he had been let go, and the next place he worked fired him for sexual harassment. I had a month's vacation where I got totally prepared for World of Warcraft Cataclysm, and then I took a new job. I was happy as a clam. I think managers that end up working in places like Target don't realize how frequent it is for people to not really care about their job security. As weird as it sounds, I feel like there's a lot of people that end up working in really any kind of retail job that, if they lost it or got fired, would just kind of give a shrug to it and try and find another one in the area. It's just not the kind of job that I think people would willingly compensate around a bad manager just to keep working there. This next story is by Dekab. It's not 9 a.m. yet. I worked for a small startup for the first few years of my career. My boss, CEO, seemed to still be grasping object permanence, as he had a hard time wrapping his head around people working when he could not physically see them doing so, but he was getting better over time. Business hours were 9 to 6, but all of our work could be done from home, and we had an office in Australia that some people communicated directly with, and tight release schedules sometimes meant long nights followed by late starts. So the informal policy tended to be, as long as you were in the office by 10 and not leaving before 5, you didn't need to explain yourself. And anything beyond that was fine, as long as you gave someone a heads up, especially if you were managed by the CEO, who was too busy to pay close attention to people's exact arrivals and departures, and frequently was away from the office himself, speaking at various events. Enter our new VP, a 30-something milquetoast MBA type. Unlike the CEO, he was not too busy to pay attention to arrivals and departures, and told the CEO that obviously the lazy employees were taking advantage. The CEO, who again was sort of inclined this direction himself, sends out an email one Friday saying that from this point forward, people needed to be in the office every day by 9, and they needed permission from their manager to leave before 6. Everyone was upset, but there was no real sense of long-term concern. This wasn't the first arbitrary rule that had been handed down in this fashion, and it tended to be easiest to play along for a week or two until the CEO had moved on to the next thing, and then just ignore the rule. But the next Monday, when I showed up at 8:50, two of my coworkers were sitting on the stairs to the unoccupied next floor, just talking and playing Candy Crush. "What are you doing?" "It's not 9 a.m. yet." I sat down with them, and soon someone else arrived, and the same conversation played out. At 8:59, we all got up and walked into the office. On Tuesday, there were half a dozen people on the stairs, including leadership, chatting and texting and whatever. And when the VP arrived, people would just make hard eye contact while he squirmed. Meanwhile, myself and a few other people just said screw it and arrived after 9 a.m. anyway, looking the VP straight in the eye as we walked in. A few people who were a little more conflict averse would stop for coffee across the street and just so happened to arrive at like 9:02, including people who normally preferred to start at 7 a.m. All of this meant that rather than being about half full, the office was virtually empty until 9. The end result of all this was that the office was virtually empty until exactly 9 a.m. and tended to clear out at exactly 6 p.m. Several people, including myself, simply stopped responding to anything outside work hours. One of my favorite coworkers also made a show of announcing to her contacts in the Australia office that she could now only meet between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. their time. Calamity ensued. The funny thing is that we never really talked about it before or during. It just sort of happened naturally. The CEO, who had barely been at the office on Monday/Tuesday, finally showed up early on Wednesday, asked why everyone was outside, and we told him. He opened his mouth to protest that no, that wasn't what he meant, realized what was happening, and made a strategic retreat. The policy was formally retracted 2 days later. We never discussed it again, and it was the beginning of a very messy fall from grace for the VP. I think I can really appreciate the phrase, seem to still be grasping object permanence. Rarely do I read a sentence that just perfectly summarizes a person and gets you completely in the know for what you're about to experience. OP's a good writer. But with that being said, that's a wrap on another bunch of stories here today. As always, if you guys have any favorite videos of this bunch, let me know which one in the comments down below and why. And if you enjoyed the stories in general, if you could subscribe to this channel, it'd mean a lot to me. I make these videos daily, and it's by far and away the best way to support my channel. So no matter what you did, whether it was subscribing or liking, leaving a comment, I just appreciate the heck out of you guys. And as always, I'll be back tomorrow with even more stories right here on the Storytime channel.